Ten's mother was a sweet woman who was simply overly excited at hearing every single thing about her son from his friend's mouth. Ning made sure to say every good thing about Ten without ever mentioning a single bad one, so the woman would be nothing but overjoyed. Even Caleb, who was barely friends with Ten, made sure to say what he could think was good about Ten. Ten was embarrassed the entire time, but that didn't stop the others from talking about him. After a while, a servant came to let them know that their rooms were ready. Ten quickly dragged the two of them away under the excuse that they needed to return back to the arena early tomorrow morning to meet with the academy. "I'm sorry. She likes talking a lot," Ten said once they were alone.
"It's all right," Ning chuckled a bit. "She's your mother and is proud of you. Nothing wrong with that."
Caleb agreed. Ten gave an awkward smile in the end. "Right, you guys can take a bath or go directly to sleep. I'm so sorry we couldn't go visit the city though. If not for Uncle, we could have stayed out until late midnight." "That's all right," Ning said. "I didn't really want to visit the city that much." "We still have quite a few days, don't we?" Caleb asked. "We can visit whenever we want to." "I suppose you're right," Ten said. "Then, I guess you guys can." A guard came rushing into the mansion screaming, young master, where are you?" Ten was surprised to hear someone calling him, so he quickly called back. "I'm here, what's wrong?" he asked. "Young master." The guard came up to him. "Young Lord Naylan is here for you." "Huh?" Ten's eyes narrowed in surprise. "Cousin Naylan is here? This late? How does he even know I'm home? I didn't stop to talk to anyone." "I do not know, young master, but he is calling for you and these two friends of yours," the guard said. Ten was even more surprised. "Why does he want to?" Ten. A man slightly taller than Ning, with long blonde hair, wearing a magnificent white set of robes, walked into the mansion. He had come in without the guard's approval at all. "Cousin Naylan." Ten quickly walked up to him. "What are you doing here this late?" "I'm here to see my favorite cousin," Naylan said. "I saw your matches today. Congrats on almost winning." "Thank you, cousin," Ten said. He found it slightly weird how Naylan worded the congratulations but didn't give much thought to it. "Have you eaten, cousin? I can have the servants prepare some light meals if you haven't." "No, I'm not here to eat," the man quickly said while eyeing both Ning and Caleb. Ten noticed that too and quickly spoke up. "Ah, these are my friends from the academy. This is Ning from the Frolane Empire and this is Caleb from the Hass family of the Green Dove region." "Hass?" Naylan's eyes narrowed a bit when he heard those words. The ruling family of the Green Dove region was no joke after all. "Do you have any relation to the direct line of the Hass family?" "I can fight for the position of the ruler in the future if that's what you're asking," Caleb said without hesitation, surprised Naylan. Ning was surprised too since he hadn't known that about Caleb, but then again, he hadn't been friends with the guy before the last few days. "I see, it's good to see you then," Naylan said, almost sounding sincere. Then, he turned toward Ning. "Are you from any big families in the Frolane Empire?" "Nope, mine is as small as it comes," Ning said. His fake background did have a small noble house in it, but he wanted to see how this man acted when not dealing with a noble. Ten's uncle had made some implications that this person wasn't a good person at all, so Ning wanted to see that for himself. "Huh?" He turned to look at Ten. "Why are you friends with a peasant?" "Huh? No. Brother Ning." "So what?" Ning asked. "Do nobles only have to be friends with other nobles?" "Hey." Naylan gave half a smile. "You can talk back, huh? At least you're not a coward. I can feel good doing business with you then." That caught Ning off guard. "Business? What sort?" he asked. "I want to buy your sword," Naylan said. "Tell me the price." "My sword?" Ning looked at the man. "Which sword are you talking about exactly?" "The one you left back with the guards," Naylan said. "I want to buy it." "Is that so?" Ning smiled a little as he looked at Naylan. "May I ask how exactly do you know about that sword? Do the guards of the Foreman family have a tendency to talk about what their guests have or don't have with their masters?" "Maybe," Naylan said, not getting offended at all. "I've advised the guards to let me know whenever something interesting happens, and they mentioned your sword. So, I am here to buy it from you." "Cousin Naylan, that might not be a good idea," Ten said. "It's Brother Ning's sword. You shouldn't take it from him." "Take it? You make it sound like I'm stealing his sword," Naylan said while clicking his tongue. You can't make me look bad like that, little cousin. Ning placed a hand on Ten's shoulder. It's fine, I don't mind, he said. See? Nalan was more than ecstatic to hear Ning say those words. You don't have to worry, Ten. Just stay back. He then turned around to Ning and said, I won't beat around the bush. Sell me the sword and I'll pay you whatever you want for it. Is that so? Ning said. You sure sound generous. I am generous, Nalan said. Well, in that case, I am generous too, Ning said. You don't have to pay anything for my sword at all. You can take it for free. Nalan's face produced the most magnificent smile when he heard that he could take Ning's sword for free. Really? He asked with the same excited face, like a child who had been told that their parents were going to give them that one toy they had wanted for the longest time. However, when the reality of the situation hit Nalan, his smile disappeared, turning into a frown that clearly held anger within it. Ning smiled a little when he saw that. What's wrong? You don't want it? He asked. You must be aware that I can't pick it up, aren't you? Nalan asked. That's why you tried to taunt me. Oh, Ning said. Not only were you notified about my sword, but you also already went to take it, huh? I must say that's quite rude. Is that what the main branch of the Foreman family does? Nalan's anger only increased. You dare talk about my family with your peasant's mouth? He asked. Do you want to die? Do you want to kill me? Ning asked. Brother Ning, Ten said worriedly. Please, don't. Ten, stay out of this. Nalan spoke and even used a bit of wind essence to push him back. Caleb tried to move, but Ning simply put his hand up and stopped him. Oh, you actually aren't afraid of me, Nalan said with a surprised look. There's nothing in this world that will make me afraid, Ning said. But, you're free to try as much as you want. Oh, you think you can't be scared? Nalan asked. When I'm done with you, you'll jump at every shadow and shriek at every gust of wind. I'll look forward to it, Ning said. Now, since you're aware that I won't be selling you my sword, you can go back and let us rest. Ning turned around to walk away, but the man grabbed him. His hold was strong, but to his surprise, it didn't hurt Ning at all. Thanks to having a superior physical body to the ones in his own rank, Ning's body could compare with those from a rank or two above him as well. While there was no way for him to compare in essence, he could hold his own if it was just a physical body. He grabbed Nalan's hand and pried open his fingers with relative ease. Nalan was surprised and tried to pull away his arm, but Ning wouldn't let go. He kept a tight grip and even squeezed a bit. Nalan felt a slight pain in his hand and couldn't help but be surprised. He couldn't understand how someone that was clearly weaker than him was so much more powerful. Anger flared in him and a green scythe split itself from his arm. The scythe, which looked similar to a mantis arm, was illusory in nature and seemed to be made up of wind essence. Ning quickly let go and jumped back as the scythe cut past where he stood previously. Ooh, he couldn't help but comment on what he saw. Is that your essence soul? It looks like a mantis arm. No way, is your entire soul like that of a mantis? Ning taunted him, knowing that the man was already angry. Nalan only got angrier. He poured out his essence, ready for an attack when suddenly he felt a pressure on him that came from the essence of a person of a higher rank than him. Footsteps sounded through the hallway while Ning smiled as he had already noticed the man's movement before any of the others had. What is going on here? He spoke. Ten turned around. Father, he called out. Caleb moved to the side and let the man of the house walk through. Ten's father walked up in between Ning and Nalan and looked at the both of them. What's happening? He asked. Why did I sense your essence soul flare up? Uncle Jen, I want you to hand him over to me, Nalan said as anger raged in him. I want to tear him apart with my own hands. Why? Ten's father asked. Because he's been disrespectful to me since I came here and has done nothing but try and provoke me into a fight, Nalan said. And you got provoked? The man asked while glancing at Ning from the side. By an essence manifestation rank kid? His rank might be low, but his ego isn't, Nalan said. I want you to hand him over, so I can give out a punishment on my own. Ten's father turned toward him and asked him to explain. Ten hid nothing from his father as he told everything as it was. From Nalan's overbearing attitude to Ning's arrogance. All this because of a sword? Jen looked disappointed. You came here to buy his sword? Yes, Uncle Jen, Nalan said. Do you want to sell your sword? Jen asked. No, I would like to keep my sword, Ning said. All right. Then this conversation is over, Gin said. Return to your house. He does not wish to sell you his sword. This won't do, uncle, Nalan said. We're way past the matter of the sword. He disrespected the family, so he must be punished. Nalan Foreman. Jen shouted at the man, making the house shudder for a moment with his loud voice. You come to my house at night and demand me to hand over my guest whose only crime was to talk back to you. Do you hear yourself? Nalan took a step back in fear. The words froze in his mouth. Leave. You have no more business here today, Jen spoke. Nalan gulped a bit and quickly nodded. He glanced at Ning and glared for a moment before turning around to leave. After he was gone, Ten's father turned to the three. It's late already, go and rest. After saying that, he left as well. The three watched the man leave back to the living room with a look of awe on their faces. Whoa. Caleb couldn't help but say. Dude, your dad freaking rocks. Ning went to his room and took a cold bath before going to sleep. He could have absorbed some essence through the window, but he felt like sleeping as he was feeling lazy. He woke up early the next day and left his room to go meet his friends. Ten was already up, but Caleb needed some knocking to get him to wake up. You guys will be staying for lunch, right? Ten's mother asked. I will make my best recipe for you guys. Sorry, Mom. Just have the cooks make some simple ones. We will need to return to the arena soon, Ten said. Oh, that's a shame, his mother said. All right, I'll have them prepare some simple ones. Ning and the rest had a simple meal before leaving the mansion. Can't we go around this place for a while, roam your family's very own city? Caleb asked. Sorry, but we won't make it in time if we don't leave, Ten said. It's your fault for sleeping in. Had you woken up earlier, we could have gone around, Ning said. Hey, don't make this my fault. You know I sleep a lot, Caleb said. The three reached the gate where Caleb and Ning took back their weapons. The guards seemed hesitant to see Ning take his sword away, but they had no choice but to let him go. Your cousin must have told them to stop me or something, Ning said. They're at least supposed to let him know when I take back my sword. I'm sorry this is happening, Brother Ning, Ten said meekly. Don't be sorry, Ning said. It's not your fault. Although, do tell me, if your cousin comes to attack me and I fight back, will you stop me from killing him? Ten's eyes grew wide in shock and looked at Ning. He couldn't believe that Ning was talking about killing people. Have you killed someone before? Caleb asked too with a curious face. I've had the misfortune of knowing what it's like to kill someone, Ning said and didn't elaborate further. So, what's your answer? I don't know, Ten said. He's still my cousin, my family. So, I will most likely be against you. Understandable, Ning said. Now let's hurry up. If we go back in time, they might let us leave today too. If we get to, we can roam the city today. Feeling excited, Caleb quickened his pace, and to not get left behind, Ten increased his pace as well. They quickly left the city and made their way toward the arena. It was 8:30 in the morning, so by the time they got to the arena, it was well past 9. In just a short time, the audience will have fully gathered and the matches would start. Please, just consider it, a desperate voice spoke loudly from the hallway that led to the academy's viewing space. Ning frowned a little when he realized he knew who that sound belonged to. Is that Teacher Hyan? Caleb said curiously. They followed the voice and quickly arrived at a commotion that included not just Hyan, but also various other teachers from their academy, including the headmaster who seemed too glum to talk. There were other adults from various academies, but they were more on the sideline, looking at the drama that was unfolding. Please, you have to understand our problems, the teacher said. Surely you can just think about it. What do you want me to do? The other group he was talking to responded. Do you want me to stop the competition for just your sake? Hyan couldn't say anything to that. The three newly arrived students were very confused, so they got closer to see what was happening. When they did, the teacher Hyan noticed them. His gloomy face suddenly lighted up for a moment. Wait, we have some, he quickly said and turned around toward the three. You guys, are you all right? Us? Caleb looked confused. We're fine. Then do you want to take part in the competition today? The teacher asked. Huh? Ten responded. But teacher, I just finished my competition yesterday. What about the ones that should be taking part? They're incapacitated right now. They couldn't even walk here, Hyan explained. Because they can't be here, we're without any players for the combat competition taking place today. However, since you guys are here, we can have at least 3, the teacher explained. Oh, just 3? Ning asked. Isn't the total amount 20 per academy? As I said, the others are out for the moment, the teacher said. So, what do you say? I wouldn't mind taking part, Ning said. My competition was quite boring, so this would add the bit of spice necessary honestly. Great. The teacher said. At least we have 3 players. Oh, about that, Ning said and turned around. What's with the crowd here? Did someone start a circus or something? A young man's voice echoed throughout the hallway. Prince. The teacher shouted in surprise once more. You're back. Of course, I'm back, the prince said. What? Were you worried I went ahead and joined a different academy? Haha, don't worry, I won't be leaving the Blackhawk Academy at all. He's obviously worried about something else. The princess behind him spoke. Go ahead, teacher, tell us what you want to say. The teacher looked at the prince and princess, as well as the 2 bodyguards that remained with her always. 7, he said softly under his breath. Coming to the arena today, he had expected the academy to be disqualified from the combat competition of the next 3 days, which gave the most amount of points. Thankfully, he now had 7 people to help him. That was still a far cry from the original 20, but it was still a lot better than the nothing he had just a few moments ago. Oh, a voice spoke. Do we get to join the competition on our own? Then I want to join too. Hyan looked at the red-haired girl who had just arrived and couldn't help but smile. 8. That gave him more relief than anything during the stressful day. We can join, right? The red-haired Yorsha asked with an excited look on her face. She didn't understand what was happening. All she cared about was the fact that she got to take part in today's competition, which she previously could not due to being a first-year student. The others didn't show the same excitement as her. The prince and princess were already meant to be fighting today, and so were their bodyguards, so there wasn't a newfound excitement in their eyes. Instead, they were confused like most of the newly arrived people as to just what was happening. 8 Any more? The staff asked the teacher, who shook his head. That's all, I'm afraid. It's a miracle we even have these in the first place, he said. Thank you for understanding and waiting for us. No problem, the staff said. Go have these kids registered immediately. Yes, at once, the teacher said. Once the staff left, the teacher turned around toward the 8 students with a rather thankful look. Thanks to you guys, we're still in the competition. The headmaster finally spoke with a sigh of relief. I am very grateful to each and every single one of you. Can you explain just what exactly is happening? The prince asked. It sounds like there was some trouble. Sure, the teacher said. Come with me, I'll explain while you guys register. The 8 students were taken away from the place to a hall where over 200 people were already gathered. These included staff and teachers, but mostly it was just students from the various academies that were going to take part in the combat competitions for the next 3 days. Someone poisoned our students, the teacher spoke softly. What? The prince shouted at once, followed by a few gasps from the girls. Are they dead? The princess quickly asked. No, it wasn't a lethal poison, the teacher quickly replied. Just one that caused bowel problems for everyone at night. They had to spend the majority of their time and energy taking care of themselves. By the time we got them antidotes, it was already morning and they were already too tired to fight today, the teacher said. They couldn't even walk to come here and are resting back in the lodge right now. Shit, that's quite bad, Caleb said. Are you fine, teacher? You must have eaten the same food, right? Yes, but our body is stronger, so at least we could come here, the teacher said. If I were to fight today, I can't do that either. Who did this? The princess asked. There must be a culprit. Did you find anyone? No, but we do have a suspicion, the teacher said before slowly turning toward the group of students and teachers who were quite happy right now. The Essence Heart Academy. Was it those guys? Yorsha asked. We are not sure, but there is a very high chance it was them that did it, the teacher said. After all, no one else benefits as much as they by doing what they did. They have the second most amount of points, right after our academy. If we were suddenly out of the competition, they would rack up a whole lot of points, which would easily push them above us in the rankings. That way, they would have a very high chance of winning. They might still do it, the princess said, looking around. I don't want to bring down our morale, but our team isn't the cream of the crop either. Not to mention, we don't even have half the number of fighters that are allowed. The teacher sighed when he heard that. I can't help it, he said. Only you 8 remain after all. We'll have to make do with what we've got, the prince said. Let's go register. The group of 8 was taken to the registration place where they were all asked for their names. Aside from the names, however, they were also tested for their essence rank, which surprised all of them, as that was not something that was ever tested beforehand. What's the point of trying to check our essence rank? Yorsha frowned as she asked. Shouldn't we be allowed to keep it a secret so we can surprise our opponents? It's for the seed, the teacher said. The seed? Most of the students there had no idea what they were talking about. The competition has a total of 200 participants, but having them fight one-on-one will at some point leave out single fighters that won't get to compete. It's fine early on, but imagine it happens around the semifinal where one person gets to move up without fighting. So, from the very start, they will have to make sure that as soon as the first round of competitions is over, there are only 128 participants remaining in the second round. For that, they seed fighters into the second round. I don't know the numbers exactly, but I'm sure we will be finding that out soon, the teacher said. As soon as he mentioned, a big board of light was crafted using someone's essence where brackets started forming. There were a total of 200 spots for names as of yet, of which a significant portion was separated to come in the second round. Is that the seed you are talking about? Yorsha asked. Yes, the teacher said. Let's see, he counted for a few seconds before coming up with a number. 56. It seems 56 people will be able to move on to the second round without fighting anyone. Of the remaining 144 fighters, 72 would move on to the next round, making a total of 128 fighters to choose from. Oh, the students said with a surprised look. Names started appearing one after another as names were marked in the 56 spots first. Their names were there based on strength. From the Blackhawk Academy, only 3 people had their names on the seeded list. The prince, the princess, and the male bodyguard were the only ones that moved on to the second round without any fights. As for the remainder, they would have to fight to move on to the next round. Aside from the 56 strong people, 12 other people were going to get a free pass to the next round. After all, the Blackhawk Academy had 12 people missing. The various academies whispered to themselves about how the Blackhawk Academy was going to lose, or how unfortunate of timing it was. Some even talked about who could have possibly done this, with a few coming closer to the answer than they could imagine. To the members of the Blackhawk Academy, none of this truly mattered. They were all simply focused on the competition at hand. Once the names of the seeded members were revealed on the lightboard, everyone looked at it to judge who became the lucky one. 12 people immediately cheered as they didn't have to fight anyone the first time around. However, when they looked at the second round, they frowned. As if on purpose, those who could skip the first round were pitted against one of the 56 seeded fighters. There was no way in hell these people were possibly winning against these people. Cries of complaints rang out soon enough, but the staff didn't seem to care. Ning looked at the board and saw his name come up within the first 10 battles. Issen, huh? From the Dream Dust Academy. I wonder how strong he is, Ning thought. That's quite the fair matchups, the teacher said. No 2 students of the same academy will have to fight their own people until the third round. They really did a good job with the brackets. My fight is the last, Caleb complained a bit. Do you think he'll be fighting tomorrow instead of today? No, I'm sure the first round of battle will end today. Even at worst, it will take 10 hours at most for the entirety of the fights, so it's easily doable today. In fact, they might even make the fights last 5 minutes each, with a group of judges to decide who won if neither is defeated, the teacher said. Then I guess I'm fighting today, Caleb said. You can watch the fight from here, I'm sure. Those whose fight is early, start preparing for it. Those who are fighting late, you can rest for the time being, but do strategize. Once enough of the audience had arrived, the combat competitions finally began. The first pair of fighters were sent onto the arena, where a barrier sprung up to cage them and their attacks in. Just as the teacher had mentioned, they only had 5 minutes to fight, with the judges deciding the victor in the case where no one won. Ning watched the fight take place, but to his surprise, there wasn't much to see at all. Since most of the stronger fighters were already seated for the next round, the ones fighting today were barely any stronger than the ones that fought in the newcomers' combat competition. Even the crowd seemed to know this, as there was really not much excitement in the air at all. 8 fights went by in a flash, of which 6 were decided by victory and 2 were decided by the judges. You only entered the essence manifestation realm a month ago and you already have to fight in such a major battle. I'm sorry to have to do this. The teacher spoke to Ning as he was getting ready to leave. It's all right. It's not your fault or anything, Ning said. Besides, getting to take part in such a competition as a first year is not something that happens regularly, is it? His was the 10th fight and the 9th was happening right now. Are you not nervous? The teacher asked. No, Ning said, looking at the battle that was slowly coming to an end. Are you excited? The teacher asked. Ning thought for a bit. Not really, he said. The teacher was a little surprised. You're not excited or nervous? He asked. Can I ask why? Ning looked at the match that came to an end and smiled a little. Looking at the matches that have taken place until now, there's nothing there for me to be nervous or excited about. He stood up from where he sat, ready to leave. I'm going to win either way after all. He walked away, leaving the teacher stunned for a moment. A few, good luck, were spoken toward him, which he acknowledged before leaving for the arena. He arrived on top of the stone arena, standing quite a distance away from his first opponent, a late teenage student from the Dream Dust Academy. Ning looked at the axe in his hand that was made up of fire essence. He could sense water essence, but he couldn't see it at all. He must be wearing the armor on the inside, Ning thought. He pulled out his sword, with its sheath still attached, and got ready for the battle to begin. The young man started with a fireball that flew straight toward Ning. A gust of air sent it off course, needing Ning to do nothing more. Another ball of fire appeared in the air, a rather massive one. However, this time, it didn't shoot away like the first time. Instead, a ball of water fell on it, immediately exploding into steam that filled the area for a bit. Ning frowned the moment he sensed another type of essence appearing all of a sudden. Rays of light hit him from multiple sides from within the steam. It seemed that the man actually had a light essence core. Ning didn't use his essence again. Instead, he simply dashed forward, going through the steam to arrive in front of the young man. The young man hadn't expected a head-on fight at all, and with Ning's speed, he couldn't depend on either. A single kick from Ning sent the young man flying so far that the referee had to protect him. Since the referee was involved, the young man naturally lost. And with that, Ning's first match was over. Ning left the stage, returning back to the hall where everyone was waiting for him. Ten gave a big smile as he walked toward him. Brother Ning, I knew you could do it. Haha, you made it look so simple, he said. Are you sure it wasn't simple? Caleb asked. All he did was use an essence attack or two and then kick the guy. It really looked so easy. Yeah, but you should know that Brother Ning's physical strength is greater than any of ours. If we were in that situation, we wouldn't have been able to take part in the fight at all, Ten explained. Good job, friend. You did well, Prince Alan said to him while patting his shoulder a few times. Ning gave a simple nod in thanks and looked toward the teacher. Do I stay around or will I have to leave? He asked. It feels like I should be done for the day. The teacher looked at the chart and frowned a little. Well, it's hard to say, he said. Yours is one of the first matchups in the next round, so, if things progress quickly today, they will require you to stay. It's better to stay around anyway. There is no one but the headmaster and a few other teachers in the stand. That makes sense, Ning said. I guess I can stay and watch the next fights then. You do that, the teacher said, his eyes focused on the board which said that Ning's next opponent would in fact be one of the seeded individuals. There were 56 seeded individuals with 72 moving on from this round. It was expected for a lot to have an opponent such as that. Still, as the teacher continued looking, he realized that of the 5 that had to fight in the first round, 4 of them directly went against one of the seeded individuals. 10 was the only one that didn't have to fight someone else. The matches progressed similarly to what had taken place until now. The female bodyguard of the princess had her match around the 20s matches and went after Ning. 10 was next, then Yorsha, and finally Caleb. Caleb was the final participant and he fought tooth and nail to win against his opponent who had an Earth Essence core that completely defended against most of Caleb's wind-based attacks. He only defeated the man by using his wind skills along with his earth armor to create a sandstorm that blinded the man and then used water sword to send out attack after attack, at least one of which landed and defeated the man. The first round of battles was over around 4 p.m. Instead of ending the competition immediately, the staff members came together to make a small decision. There were still 2 hours of time before it would be considered overkill on how long the competition lasted. They had originally planned for the competition to end around 6 p.m. They had done so with the plan that with 5 minutes of fighting time spread between each round, and some downtime, it would cost them 8 hours in total for 72 matches. However, perhaps because many of the fights didn't last very long, and there were actually 12 matches that were simply skipped over because of absent fighters, the staff now had to make a decision on how to proceed. They could stop and let the matches continue tomorrow as it had come to a satisfying conclusion for today, or they could continue the matches a bit longer and stop around 6 p.m. as originally intended. It would stop the competition in an awkward moment, but there were 2 hours that they couldn't waste. If they made use of these 2 hours, they wouldn't have to use such a strict competition schedule the next day around. So, they made the decision. The competition would go on, just like before. So, the matches looped back around with the ones that went in first and second today having their official match. Ning looked at the brackets that were presented on the lightboard. He frowned a bit after seeing his opponent, a seeded fighter from the Peace World Academy. He had seen the match up before, but he hadn't expected the fight to take place today. He wasn't worried about the fight. No one expected him to win anyway. Still, he couldn't help but think of the dissatisfaction he himself would face if he failed here. He was somewhat special here when it came to being an essence user. The pure essence that he had acquired from the divine beast's fruit was not something that an average person could ever hope to get. As a result, he was better than his peers in most regard. As a result, he considered himself on the same level as those that were just one step above him. However, one step above him was the low essence soul rank, and Ning had little to no idea what one could accomplish with an essence soul. After all, that wasn't something that he was ever taught, even in the academy. The teachers mentioned it here and there, but nowhere was it relevant enough for them to openly explain everything about it. He needed to know at least a few things before he went into the stage in the 4th round. "Teacher," Ning quickly spoke. "I do not know anything about essence souls. Is there anything that I need to watch out for?" The teacher looked at Ning and realized he was fully intent on fighting the person that was going to come up next. "Do you plan on winning the next fight?" he asked. The teacher would have been absolutely fine if Ning simply conceded the next few battles. In fact, he would be fine if all 4 of the first-year students did so. However, seeing the light in Ning's eyes made him feel a little hopeful. "All right, here's what you absolutely need to know." The first 3 matches were over, and it was Ning's turn to fight. He walked away, drowning in the cheers of his peers who were all still in the match. As he walked out, he saw another person walk out with him, a girl from the Peace World Academy. She had frisky hair and a pair of braids that fell down her chest. She was slightly taller than Ning, but quite thin. And the aura that came from her was definitely the low essence soul rank. She was 1 step stronger than Ning when it came to essence ranking. Ning walked onto the side of the arena where he stood and looked toward the girl as he waited for the battle to begin. He took a deep breath, conditioning himself for the battle as he remembered what his teacher had told him just minutes ago. Low essence soul rank was an improvement to one's rank certainly. Even ignoring the essence soul itself, a person's physical capabilities, all 6 senses, and the amount of essence in one's core all improved by a vast amount when one reached the low essence soul. And the essence soul itself made them a monster in its own right. Begin. The fight began before Ning could collect all of his thoughts. He pulled the sword out with the sheath still in it. He was using the wind sheath as a decoy for as long as he could so that his opponent didn't realize that he had an earth sword hidden inside of it. The girl started with a simple fireball to test Ning out. She didn't even use any conduits when she threw it out. Ning dodged the attack, sending a wind attack of his own at the girl. She didn't touch her weapons. Could it be that she had a fire essence core? He wondered. No, she might be wearing a fire armor underneath. I can't scratch out that possibility yet. Ning wondered what his approach should be in this fight. Should he stay back and dish out attacks? but the girl was bound to have a stronger essence than him. He might be closer in physical strength, but then getting in close combat against someone who had an essence soul didn't feel right. The girl naturally dodged Ning's windblade, rather easily as well. Then, she dashed forward, coming into close combat herself, letting Ning no choice but to fight.
She pulled out a sword from her hip, a light sword, and struck at him. Ning used his own sword, with the shield to stop the attack.
The girl kicked at his stomach, which Ning took, and then grabbed her leg while he was at it. He was about to throw her away when the girl jumped, spinning with her caught foot as the axis, and kicked Ning in the head. Ning barely dodged the leg by ducking in time, but suddenly something hit him from the corner of his vision. He was kicked away to the edge of the stage, barely managing to keep himself from getting kicked out. He quickly got up and saw the girl. Her leg hadn't touched him, but rather her essence soul and come out and kicked him. It was just receding back into her body, feet that was made up of fire, and almost looked like a human foot that had met up with a bird's talons. She jumped back at him, her light sword ready to stab. Ning parried the sword easily and stabbed back himself. The girl suddenly burst into flames, but Ning's sword still made contact as he hit her right in the stomach. At the same time, air gathered around him and moved in a circle so that the fire that came out of her didn't touch him too much. Ning jumped away and collected himself, while the girl looked in his direction in anger. Two brilliant red wings appeared from her back, each of which spread nearly 5 meters away from her back. The wings were many times larger than what a normal wing was supposed to be like, but Ning understood what was going on. That was another property of an essence soul. Essence souls were usually many times larger than their physical bodies. As the essence rank grew, their soul's size grew as well. As such, one had control over how large one could make it. The only trouble was that the smaller the soul was, the more compact it was and had more offensive and defensive physical capabilities. However, when it came to defensive essence capabilities, it was still better if the soul was small, considering you only had yourself to defend. However, when it came to offensive essence power, an essence soul had no problem in any form. In fact, sometimes larger sizes even gave greater opportunities, as it would hit a lot of things at once if that was what they were planning. Ning looked at the fiery wing of the girl and was scared for a moment. He wasn't sure what she was going to do. It was going to be a fire skill for sure, as the essence soul itself was a fire element, which took after the essence core of a person. The girl flapped her flaming wings just once and many fiery feathers fell in Ning's direction swiftly. Ning couldn't play around right now. He used his earth sword and suddenly created a massive rock in front of him that took all the damage. He waited for a while for the explosions to end while constantly keeping track of where the girl was. When he sensed her move to the other side, he would move as well. He circled around the massive rock, using it as a defense from anything the girl attacked. It went on for a dozen or so seconds before the girl realized what was happening. Her wings came out once again and she flapped, suddenly taking to the air where she was high above the rock. Ning looked above with an absolute shock and frowned. What should he do now? The moment the girl was in the sky, away from the massive rock, she could finally see Ning. Seeing him next to the rock with his sword and sheath in his hand, she was ready to attack. This wouldn't just be a normal attack either. She was going to rain down hellfire on him, so he had nowhere to go. Her wings opened once more, the fires from within it erupting to the hottest they had ever been. The fire started falling from her wings like water, dripping to the ground and burning where it landed. Ning moved away from the rock and put his sword back in its sheath. He used the wind sheath to create a small tornado around him to fling away any fire that fell on him. It worked for a while, but soon the tornado itself turned into a fire tornado, slowly heating the inside. Ning started sweating a bit and thought of what to do. He did have a few solutions, but he needed the quickest one. As he thought, the girl saw the fire tornado and decided to end it all at once. A light attack fell straight from the eye of the tornado, which Ning could not stop with just wind. The attack fell on him, not enough to wound, just enough to hurt him, and definitely enough to make him lose focus on the wind he was controlling. The fire tornado disappeared, leaving Ning wide open for the girl in the sky to attack. The girl's essence soul emerged from her fully, a giant 3-headed entity, where each one of the heads was her own. The essence soul had arms that looked more like talons and wings behind her from before that were flaming. The essence soul had no genitalia, and the feet were also somewhat talon-like. The entire thing was about 10 meters or so large, making it appear like a crimson god in the sky. The soul used some sort of power, creating a spear that appeared more like a trident than anything. Then, it aimed for Ning and launched its attack. Ning could only imagine when he would get his own essence soul as well. If he could get a great one, he could think his adventure in this world was fulfilled. The referee moved as he had to stop the attack from landing on Ning. He had nearly moved many times, but Ning had managed to come in clutch each time, defending himself against a person that was a rank above his own. However, this was the clearest demonstration of how strong an essence soul realm cultivator was, so there was no point in waiting for Ning to do anything. He wouldn't survive even with all his skills if the attack landed. A blue arm came out of the referee where the arm looked like it was made up of some sort of wood, while the fingers were sharp blades like spearheads. He was about to stop the trident when he noticed something. When he realized what was happening, his eyes went wide in absolute shock. The flame trident landed on the stage, completely destroying and blowing it wide. The girl saw the destruction, which she hadn't expected, and was very confused. Why did the referee not stop the attack? Why would the referee not stop the attack before it fell? Or did he get the young man out of the way? Her essence soul had already withdrawn, all except the wings which she was using to fly. Now that she was victorious, it was time to go back down. I hope he didn't die, she thought, as that would be extremely bad for her as she would be disqualified instantly. Just as she thought that she sensed something from above her. Her head turned just in time to see Ning arrive next to her. How? She could barely speak up a single word when Ning's fist came crashing down on her face. The girl was punched with every force Ning had in his body. Since this wasn't his usual body, he didn't have to hold back his strength, and as such he could give it his all. The girl dropped from the sky with the force of a meteor. The referee had to jump in and grab her so she wasn't hurt by the crash. He brought her down slowly, only to see that her left cheek was red, while her mouth was somewhat bleeding. The referee could imagine that Ning had used his everything to punch her and bring her down. He looked up in the sky and saw Ning using wind skills to try and slow himself down as he fell. After a certain height, he let himself fall and landed on his leg. He looked around to make sure he didn't land outside of the arena. It was hard to tell since everything had broken from the girl's trident attack. "I'm still in the match, right?" Ning asked the referee. "Yes, you are," the referee said. "In fact, you've won." The referee turned around and called for a few people to come to take her to the medical section of the arena. Then, he announced Ning's victory. Ning walked away with a happy look on his face, while a few people came up to fix the stage in the meantime. "What did that kid do?" one of those guys asked. "Did he use his wind skill to shoot himself up?" "He only used wind and earth essence, so I don't think how else he could go that high," another person said. "No," the referee said. "He did neither." "Huh? What do you mean?" one of the men asked. The referee wasn't sure if he should say it or not. If the information got out to the other schools, it could be his fault. As it seemed, no one else had seen what he had seen. Since he was so close, he had even sensed it. He was absolutely sure that this young man had just used one of the rarest essence in all of the world. The space essence. Ning walked back into the waiting room where many people stared at him as he entered. He walked up to his group, who were all staring at him as if they had seen a monster. "You actually did it," the teacher couldn't help but say. He had no hope in anyone other than the three-seeded fighters winning, and somehow Ning had won against an essence soul realm cultivator. "Thanks for the info, teacher," Ning said. "That helped quite a bit." The teacher gave a wide smile. "Good," he said, happy to himself. "Good job, friend," the princess spoke with a wide grin. "What is your name again?" "Ning. I shall remember it from now on." Ning nodded slightly and thanked the princess. He sat beside Ten and Caleb, who immediately started asking what he did at the end. "It's simple really," Ning said. "I created a large volume of air between me and the ground and launched high in the air." "Oh," the two of them said, thinking to themselves if that was possible. In the first place, how much volume of air did one need to suddenly launch oneself that high up in the sky? It had to be a very large amount. Did Ning have a sheath that was made from a large amount of air? How did he even get that wind was notoriously hard to convert into a conduit, since if it wasn't contained inside a room or something, it was quite impossible to spread your essence through a lot of wind and have it stay there long enough for it to get converted? Not to mention, even if that did happen, how was he not struck by that huge trident that was right in between him and the girl? While the two young men were focused on the answer, Ning secretly looked at the people from the other schools. He could already see the eyes and ears of everyone outside of his school focused on him, trying to gauge what he did. He wasn't sure if the lie would be caught or not, but it would certainly help if his words confused them as to what happened. If he could at least keep the people guessing, he would be happy. The one named Shayna, the princess's guard, was up after 3 more matches. When the time came, she went up to the stage and fought against an enemy with an essence soul. As it turned out, the girl herself had an essence soul as well. The Blackhawk Academy was a large academy after all, and almost everyone that was chosen to fight in the combat competition was someone in the low essence soul realm. Still, Shayna was one of the weaker ones, so she wasn't chosen to be in the 56 seated spots and was instead forced to fight her way up. As such, unlike many other folks of her own rank, she had to fight another fighter with Essence's soul in the top 128. The girl Shayna was quite the fighter, as she had to become a princess's bodyguard. She wasn't that strong in terms of essence, but she was trained enough to defeat the person she fought in just under 3 minutes. Her water essence soul, which she had to use to win the fight, was a humanoid soul with snake-like arms that shot out water attacks that themselves flew like snakes. Her opponent was also slightly unlucky as they had a fire essence soul, so the two souls contradicted each other, with neither winning outright. It all came down to a single attack in the end to finish the battle, and the girl had a better one. After she walked back, they all congratulated her, but the girl wasn't very talkative and kept quiet next to the princess. The sun was about to set, so it was getting close to the time when it would all end for the day. The teacher kept looking at the board because someone was scheduled for the 23rd match, which was right at the end. Depending on how the next couple of fights went, it would be hard to tell. Then, as the 22nd match ended, the 23rd match's fighters were called into the stage after announcing that it would be the final match of the day. A man from the Essence Heart Academy stood up to walk to the stage. On Ning's side, a man stood up as well. It was the prince's turn to fight. He stood up, his face cold with no emotion, wearing a complete set of black uniform, and started walking away. He didn't speak as he walked away. Ning looked forward to the prince's fight. While he had already known that the princess's essence was moonlight essence, he had yet to see what the prince could do. All he had done since coming here was flirt with girls at almost every chance he got, but hadn't yet taken part in a single competition. So, it was quite the chance for him to show off, and for Ning to see what he could do. The prince walked to the edge of the stage as instructed and looked toward his opponent. There was no fear in his eyes and no disgust. He didn't fear his opponent, nor did he look down on him. He would treat him with the respect every man in the competition deserved. Start. As soon as the words flew out of the referee's mouth, the prince moved. He moved with such swiftness that most people couldn't even see how fast he was. His opponent could barely move in time as he tried to create an earth wall in front of him. However, before he could do so, his body grew cold as ice formed around him, trapping him inside. The prince arrived right next to him and punched him in the guts with a force that shattered the ice and flung his opponent to the wall on the other side of the stage. He won the match in less than 2 seconds. From the sudden ice that surrounded the prince's opponent's body, it was clear that the prince was an ice essence user. His essence soul was probably that of ice as well. Since conduits were hard to control to create around a person, rather than just on them, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that he did in fact have an ice core. As for some that were quite keen on what they were looking for, they were aware of another thing that nearly everyone else had missed because of how easy it was to miss it. The prince was in the high essence soul realm. The essence soul realms were divided into 3 realms: low essence soul, high essence soul, and true essence soul. It was said that until you were in the true essence soul realm, you hadn't truly reached the essence soul realm yet. There wasn't much merit to why it was said, but people believed that it was because it was the realm where one could start to combine their body and soul to use it effortlessly, adding one strength to the other. That was what made it possible for people to go into the fabled stellar harmony realm. No one truly knew if this realm was even a possibility or not in humans, but there have been many records of beasts in the wild reaching this realm, mostly in the ocean. After all, It was only after this realm did one reach the realm of legends that only a few beasts could ever reach. The Divine Realm. After his victory was announced, Prince Alan returned to the hall where the others waited for him. They started speaking words of congratulations as soon as he entered, and the prince simply waved his hands, telling them he didn't need any of that. The announcement of the event today ending was made. There had been 95 separate combats today, 83 if the 12 missing from Blackhawk Academy were to be ignored. If the same amount was to be fought tomorrow as well, they would easily finish the top 64 and even finish the top 32. If they dared to squeeze in the time, they could even finish top 16, but everyone doubted they would do that. Keeping 32 matches for the final day seemed like the right choice to everyone. They left the hall, walking outside to meet up with the headmaster and others. "You all have no idea how proud you've made me," the old man said. "I would have been fine knowing that half of you dropped out of the competitions, but seeing that you all went through the first round, and 3 even already passed the second round, I can only say that you have all done everything beyond my expectations." The 8 students smiled, with Ning and a few others thanking the headmaster for his kind words. They knew why the headmaster was so happy. The difference in points between the people that lost in the first round and those that were in the second round was huge. To make it important to pass each round, the points were set up in a way that the better you did, the more points you got. Meaning, in the first round, the 72 that failed all got simply 10 points each. In the second round, of the 128 participating, each one that failed got 30 points. In the top 64, they would all get 60 points. In the top 32, it would jump to 100 points, then 150 for the top 16, and finally 200 for the top 8. For the top 4, it was slightly different. The one that came fourth overall would get 250 points. The one that came third would get 300. The one that came second would get 350. And finally, the one that came first against all odds would get 400 points. That sort of point was enough to even make the school that was at the bottom of the rankings currently shoot up to the first if all things went right. That was why this 3-day-long combat competition was considered equally as important as everything that had come before them. The group started walking out of the arena and made their way back to the Light Dance Academy. "Oh yeah, good job on defeating that Essence Heart Academy's student in a single attack. That was so satisfying to see," the headmaster said. "He was a weak one anyway," the prince said. "Had he been strong, he would have been seated and wouldn't have to go against me. Still, he seemed to have an essence soul, so he wasn't that weak," the headmaster said. "I suppose you're not wrong in that regard, headmaster," the prince said. "And I must say, it did feel good defeating him like that." "Haha, of course, you would," the headmaster said, and then turned to Ning. "You did quite amazing today too." "Thank you, headmaster," Ning said quickly. "I swear," the old man said. "The way it looked like you almost lost, only for you to appear all the way up there in the sky and defeat the girl. That was simply marvelous." Ning smiled. "Thank you," he said once again. The headmaster looked at Ning closely and shook his head in surprise. "When Hyan said all those months ago that there was a new kid in our school that had a very pure essence that hadn't been seen before, I didn't trust much at that time. However, I can see that I should have instead paid more attention to you back then." The headmaster thought for a bit and said, "Because of how well you did in the combat competition, despite not having to do so makes me want to reward you. How about 50 credits once you return to the academy?" "Just him, headmaster? What about us?" 10 asked. The headmaster chuckled. Haha, if you can make it through the next battle, I'll give you all a reward as well," he said. "In fact, for every single round you pass from here on forward, I will give you all different kinds of rewards, all with increasing worth and importance." The 8 students finally saw just how destroyed everyone looked with their faces that seemed like they hadn't eaten anything in days. "Are you all okay now?" the prince asked. "We're doing much better, Your Highness," one of the people answered with a weak voice. "I'm glad you were fine, Your Highness." "I got lucky," the prince said. "Anyway, continue resting, and don't worry about the competition. The 8 of us made it through to the next round." The few students that were gathered couldn't believe it. "What? You guys joined? How many?" "8 of us," the prince answered. 4 of them are even the new students that joined just half a year ago. "And you all made it past the first round? That's..." All the students were surprised. They talked for a bit while the teachers went to complain to the Light Dance Academy staff. Someone had poisoned them, and as the host, it was their responsibility to make sure that didn't happen. It had nothing to do with Ning though, so he went back to the room and started absorbing essence. He had used a bit already, so he needed to catch up. You. A voice called for him just as he was starting. He opened his eyes and saw the prince in front of him. Yes, prince? He asked. I didn't see any storage artifacts on you. Have you not brought anything? The prince asked. I only had some clothes to bring with me, and they're over there in that closet, Ning pointed. The prince frowned a bit. And, how are you planning to restore the essence you used today? Isn't pure essence notoriously hard to absorb? He asked. Well, once the night falls and the moon comes out, I can start absorbing moonlight essence, Ning said. That's still slow, isn't it? The prince said. You don't have a moonlight core. You have a pure core. That is true, Ning said, but I can't help it. You may not, but I can, the prince said. He waved his hand and a white crystal with a slightly blue hue came out of his storage. Take this. It's about 90% pure, the prince said. You did well today in the competition, so I'm giving this to you. I hope you'll continue doing well from here on out as well. Thank you, Your Highness, Ning said with a great smile as he took the crystal. He wasn't going to refuse anything that was given to him for free after all. He started absorbing the essence once they were done with dinner. The group had special people test the food before eating it this time around after learning from past mistakes. Once they were done, Ning finally started absorbing essence until about midnight. Once his core was full, he stopped, putting the remaining crystal into his closet and going to sleep. There was absolutely no point in trying to absorb everything when he would most likely need it again the next day over as well. The night passed and the sun came back up along with the other moon in the sky. After having their breakfast, the group left for the arena again. This time around, everyone could go. Of course, not everyone could take part. The 8 split away from the group, taken away by the teacher to the hall where they waited for the competition to start again. The competition started in the 24th match. After 5 matches, it was the prince's bodyguard's turn to fight. He easily won against an essence manifestation rank opponent without even using his essence soul. All he used was the fire sword on his waist, not letting anyone know what he was capable of. It was a long while before another person from their group had to fight. Their next match was 10 against another essence manifestation realm participant. Due to how the competition was structured, there were only 6 such fights possible. His was the 41st fight and he fought his damn hardest to win. Both fighters were equal in almost every regard, so the victor came down to the judges after the time was up. The next one up was the princess. Ning wondered what the princess was going to do as she only had moonlight essence. While quite pure, it was still an elemental essence, a subtype of light essence. As such, it certainly didn't have access to a lot of skills. Ning got to see nothing from her fight, unfortunately. The princess just wasn't pushed far enough to use any skills that were notable in the fight. She used her light sword and won against her enemy easily. The next person to fight was Yorsha. The red-haired girl went over to the stage and waited for her fight to start. Her enemy was another person with an essence soul, so from the very start, she had to bring out her all to win in this match. Her opponent, a Ma with long black hair, was someone who was much older than her and looked strong as well. The battle started and the man attacked. He laughed water attacks at her. Suddenly, the water turned into steam, exploding as its volume expanded at once. Even through the thick steam, one could see a slightly red haze inside it. A layer of fire had appeared around Yorsha's body, spreading a meter around her. While the fire itself didn't look strong, her opponent couldn't help but get terrified as the temperature of the arena increased sharply. The temperature continued to soar even though the man poured as much water as he could to drop it. The girl simply increased it relentlessly. Some people in the crowd recognized what she was doing. The legendary skill known as the Burning Sun that belonged to the Ulyrus family, the ruler of the Redraven region, was something these people had not expected to see today. So, when the young man gave up in the end instead of potentially getting burned, no one could blame him for it at all. Caleb lost, but that was expected by everyone. He returned, a little saddened and a little devastated that he lost. After all, he was the only one of the 4 first years that lost today. I'm sorry, he said to the others, she was just too strong. It's all right, the teacher said. You did your best. That's all that matters. Caleb nodded, but he still felt bad. He sat down next to Ning and Ten. While Ten consoled him on his loss, Ning was completely focused on the chart in front of him. The top 32 matches were about to begin and he had the second match on the list, going up against another low-essence Soul Realm fighter. It wouldn't be so troublesome for him, had he not heard that the man he was fighting was one of the strongest, if not the strongest fighter of the Frolain Academy. And he had apparently shown quite the unique essence core as well, which troubled Ning as he hadn't even known that such an essence even existed. Ning sighed and prepared for a difficult battle. The first battle had one participant that was part of the lucky 6 pairs that didn't have to fight a low-essence Soul Realm opponent, so they were up against one on this round and were defeated easily. So, Ning's match came up faster than he could expect it. He stood up, ready to leave. Before he could go, the teacher grabbed him and whispered into his ears. They should have suspicions that you have access to a space technique. Don't let them verify it too early, the teacher said. Ning nodded. The space technique was his escape technique. He didn't necessarily have to use it in a battle, but since he had already shown it to a degree, he didn't want to use his other techniques just yet. Besides, his defensive technique, while amazing, used up a lot of essence and was entirely defensive, so that was a bit annoying to use as well. He walked up to the stage and looked at the man in front of him. He took a deep breath and pulled out his sword from the sheath, keeping them both in either of his fights. The man opposite him took out a light sword from his storage artifact. As for armor, he was most likely already wearing one, but Ning couldn't see it. The battle began as the referee gave the command. Immediately, Ning shot out a couple of medium-sized rocks at the man. The man did nothing but dodge with a smile on his face. He pointed his finger at Ning, wiggling it, asking him to go again. Bastard. Ning thought and shot out a few more rocks, this time a little larger. He couldn't start out sending chunks of rocks at the man. Using too much essence at once took time and created openings for the opponent to exploit. Also, using large amounts of essence at once could cause you some fatigue. Do it long enough and you were bound to get tired very soon. Ning's opponent dodged the attacks again and threw out some small light attacks, none of which were meant to hurt him. Ning was starting to get a little angry at the man. He almost started pointing a finger at the man but stopped. The man was definitely not being careless here. He was strong for sure and teasing him was a way to make him make a mistake. He must be ready for whatever attack I can throw at him, Ning thought. He decided to test the theory. A gust of wind started blowing across the stage. Strong winds, but not strong enough to harm anyone. The man wondered what Ning was trying to do when dust appeared on the stage. The wind blew the dust, causing a dust storm that reduced the visibility of the surrounding by a lot. Ning had willed dust into existence using his earth sword and used his wind sword to create the dust storm. Sand. The man was surprised when he saw the glittering sand in the air. How? He couldn't understand how this was happening. Did his opponent have a sand skill perhaps? He knew he was a pure essence user, so any skill was possible. That must be it, he thought. After all, earth swords can't make sands and he doesn't seem to be wearing any sand armor. The man finally frowned as he needed to start relying upon his essence sense to see what Ning was up to. He sensed Ning using earth essence, so he had to dodge the attack. Except, he had to now guess where the attack had to be coming within a second. He sensed the sudden appearance of earth essence around him. He looked up and saw a massive rock falling on top of him that was moments away from smashing onto him. Ning couldn't see what was happening as he had blinded himself due to the dust storm. He heard a loud crash, followed by smaller crashes as the massive boulder he had let loose rolled away. Ning had already stopped using the dust storm, so he could only wait for the dust to settle. However, even without that, he was aware of the fact that he had not in fact just won. The man had managed to use his essence at the last moment to protect him. When the dust settled, Ning, the referee, and the entire surrounding audience witnessed the white, translucent geometric spikes that had come out of the ground, all around the young man. So he really does have it, Ning thought. A crystal core. Crystal essence was one of the rarest essences to find to absorb on this planet. It was a very specific subtype of earth essence that could only be found in crystal form. Normal crystals that everyone absorbed had crystal essence, but it was so heavily dominated by the pure essence that it was impossible to make use of that essence. However, if you came across a crystal mine where very few parts of the entire mine had pure essence, you could collect essence from that mine and form a crystal core. However, because of how difficult it was to find an essence mine, let alone one that was filled with crystal essence, most people did not have that core at all. This meant that from a very young age, the man in front of Ning could do nothing but only absorb essence through crystals. Any instance of absorbing other essence would cause him trouble, so he had to be strict about it. To cultivate up to the low essence soul realm with crystal core meant that the young man's family had most likely stumbled upon a crystal mine or something. Ning couldn't see how else he could get his hands on it to reach such a level. The crystals broke, falling across the destroyed ground. The man walked out from inside the crystal enclosure, completely unharmed, and somewhat annoyed. To think you could push me to use my essence against you as only an essence manifestation realm fighter, the man said. I commend you on your accomplishment. Thank you, Ning said. But this is just the beginning. If you continue looking down on me, this might as well become your last fight of the competition. The man's eyes narrowed in anger as he seriously began fighting. He swung his sword, sending out light attacks as he did so. The attacks landed on Ning, who did his best to block it. Light essence made the attacks faster than normal, but it also was generally weaker. After all, it followed the properties of light itself. Ning blocked it as well as he could. While the attacks stung, they didn't hurt him. He protected his body while looking through his essence sense. He could see from his entire body if he wanted to, but then, what fun was that? Suddenly, the essence he was sensing changed its aura. From light, it changed to a more powerful crystal essence. Ning quickly moved his arms away, looking at the crystal attacks that were flying toward him. Crystals were generally harder, sharper, and less crumbly compared to rocks, so the shards that were flying toward Ning were far more dangerous. Ning's sword moved, flickering in the sunlight as it cut through each of the flying shards of crystal as if he was cutting through the water. His sword sunk into the crystals with ease, carving in 1 and 2 as he accurately moved in between the attacks and destroyed all the crystals. The man was surprised. The crystals he was chucking away were supposed to be quite strong, especially with the essence he was putting into them. He couldn't understand how Ning was possibly cutting through them with so much ease. Too few, huh? I'll give you more to deal with, the man said as a white arm extended from his real arm, growing as it came out. The young man was using his essence soul now to fight against Ning. Ning saw the giant white essence soul come out and frowned. This was going to be problematic. The giant essence soul was nearly 5 meters tall, with 2 legs and 4 arms. 2 of its hands were normal hands made out of crystals, while the other 2 looked like sharp, amputated crystal limbs. The soul had a head with no face. The front of the head was completely blank, while crystal spikes grew out of the back of its head. It wasn't just the head either. The entirety of its back was the same, ridden with spikes that had grown on it as if it were a porcupine. The essence soul turned around after it appeared, pointing its back with the million spikes toward Ning. Ning's eyes went wide in surprise as he quickly poured his essence into his sword, creating a massive pillar of rock in front of him. He created multiple layers of earth barrier with his sword, while also attacking back at the same time. The 2 clashed at the center at the most for 2 seconds when his opponent sprayed dozens if not hundreds of small crystal essence shards in his direction. The pillar that Ning had made had been torn to shred while some shards had made it into the inner walls as well. The young man grinned when he saw that. You lose now, he shouted and sprayed another set of crystals at Ning, all of which were meant to destroy the last remaining earth barriers. The referee was ready to move to protect Ning, but at the last moment his eyes widened and his target changed. The young man sensed it as well. He had been ready for it after all. His teachers had told him what was most likely going to happen at the most crucial moment in battle. His opponent was going to use his space technique and arrived behind him. The moment he sensed the space essence, he turned around with a wide grin on his face. I knew you would come for my back just like you did with. His words stuck in his mouth when he saw a spray of crystals come in his direction. They were simply so fast that he couldn't use any defensive skills in time. All he could do was put a hand in front of him to protect himself. His essence soul's large palms fell in front of him as they took the brunt of the damage that he himself had sent out. The arms had turned solid, but they were still torn by the barrage of crystals that landed on it. He used the opportunity to create a wall of crystal pillars to protect himself from the rest of the crystals. His essence soul was hurt. He had made it solid to protect himself, and in doing so it had taken damage. Just as he was wondering, he sensed space essence being used behind him and turned around just in time to see Ning arrive next to him. Ning swung his sword even as he went through the portal and slashed it down on the man in front of him. The young man put up his hands out of instinct, and even his essence soul put its broken hand in front. However, Ning's sword easily sliced through the 4 solid arms, before stopping right in front of the man's skin. The referee had already arrived and used his water essence soul to try and stop, but even his soul's hand had been halfway cut into with Ning's sword. If Ning had not stopped on his own, the young man would have died. The young man's feet buckled in fear as he fell to the ground, terrified of what could have happened. Ning moved back and looked at the surprised look of the referee that couldn't believe what had happened either. "If you are involved, then I have won, right?" he asked. The referee nodded. He came out of his stupor and checked Ning's opponent to make sure he wasn't hurt. After making sure that he was fine, he announced Ning as the victor. The crowd from around the arena cheered loudly as something unbelievable had happened in their presence. Not once, but twice had a contestant that was only in the essence manifestation realm defeated an opponent in the essence soul realm. Everyone in the arena saw the usage of space essence clear as day. Ning had used it twice in a row, once to send the crystals back at his opponent, and next to teleport right next to him. Each time, a small portal had opened in front of him through which he could go in and come out on another portal that had appeared close by. At most, Ning could only use this technique at a 100-meter distance. Thankfully, that was plenty for a battle such as this. He walked away amongst the cheers, a little sad in fact, which he didn't show on his face. He had his sword in his hand, but the sheath was no longer anywhere. In the midst of chaos, one of the crystal shards had hit his wind sword, and given how little air was used to make it, it was completely destroyed with that one hit. Now, Ning had no sheath for his sword and would have to find another one, which most likely wouldn't be until after the competition was over. He flipped the sword upward, hiding in between his arm and his body so that the blade wasn't out in the open and in a dangerous position. Ning walked into the hall that was mostly silent as people stared at him as he walked in. He had after all defeated 2 people with essence souls without having one himself. He could hear whispers amongst the people. Some mentioned the word space, and some mentioned pure, one even mentioned cheating, which nearly made Ning laugh out loud. He arrived at his group and was immediately slapped on the back by the prince as he gave a hearty laugh. "Ha ha ha. My vision wasn't wrong yesterday. You really are capable of winning fights against those above your own caliber," he said loudly. Ning smiled slightly. "It was more luck than anything," he said. "My opponent wasn't ready for my space technique." "Huh? It looked like he was plenty ready," the prince said. "Well, he was ready for me to teleport, but not his own attacks," Ning said. "I was able to take advantage of the chaos." "No need to act humble, young man," the teacher said with a wide grin. "You did well. I can almost hear the headmaster laughing from the stands right now." Ning finally nodded and sat back down. The others proceeded to congratulate him while the princess's guard got ready for her own fight in a few matches. They watched the next few matches on the screen while the teacher made notes of who fought and what attacks they used. The previous day he had left it for the people in the stands to do, but since they were going to fight multiple times today, he had to do it himself. The princess's guard, Shayna, walked out on her turn and entered the arena against another girl from the Crimson Wings school. The girl in that school had a fire core and mostly used fire essence during her battle. Her essence soul looked like a fiery human with spears for hands as she herself used spears. Shayna's water essence soul with its snake-like arms whipped around in the battle against the girl with the fire essence. As the 2 powers contradicted each other quite a lot, neither was the outright victor. Shayna got unlucky, the princess said. Her opponent yesterday was a fire essence user as well, wasn't it? It was, the teacher said. But Shayna had the better moves yesterday. Today, however, her opponent is quite skilled, the prince said. Not only is she good at using her fire essence to cancel out Shayna's water essence, but her essence soul also seems capable of attacking at quite the speed with those spear arms. Shayna's snake arms can't whip out fast enough. The fight continued for a while, but the more it progressed, the harder it got for either of the two fighters to do anything to the other. They even used their strong techniques on each other, but none could get the upper hand. In the end, the 5 minutes available for the match were up with both parties gasping for breath as they were both extremely tired. Everyone patiently waited for the results to be announced as the victor was in the judges' hands now. Half a minute later, the answer came. Shayna lost the match. The other girl jumped in celebration at the fact that she had won and quickly ran back into the hall where her team celebrated with her. Shayna returned a moment later, dejected with a face that had nothing but disappointment in it. "I'm sorry, teacher, princess," she said. "I really tried my best." "Don't worry, it all came down to luck in the end," the princess said. The princess didn't blame her. After all, the main reason she hadn't been chosen as the victor was because she was using water essence, instead of fire essence, which was considered more destructive in general. It was just a matter of luck, as she had said. "You did as well as you could," the teacher said, trying to console her. The male bodyguard, Hyandus, patted her on her shoulder, telling her not to worry about it. The others in the group consoled her as well, and only after a few minutes was she no longer sad about her loss. Now, 2 of the 8 students had lost, one in the top 128, and another in the top 64. "Well, it's my turn soon," the prince said as he got up and started stretching a bit. "Teach, tell me, should I keep my energy? Will top 32 be happening today by any chance?" The teacher looked at the time. "Half of it will definitely be happening. Yours will most definitely be today after you win." "Oh, then I better end this next match quickly and prepare for my next round then," the prince said as he stood up. It was his match now. "I'll be back in a second." The prince walked up to the stage along with his opponent, a man in a gray uniform. He stood on one side of the stage and looked at his opponent. "You might want to consider giving up right now," he said. "It is all going to end the same way for you." The man frowned at the taunt and harumphed between his breaths, not giving much thought to the prince's words. An axe with a fire essence head and a glowing blue handle that seemed to drop cold mist from where it was held. The prince's opponent frowned. "Fire and ice axe? It's possible to have those two working together?" he thought. The battle began and the prince dashed forward. His speed was quite fast, but as another man with an essence soul, his opponent had to fight back. Giant earthen arms appeared from around the man, each of which was thick and looked incredibly strong. The arms slammed toward the prince, but the prince used his powers at the last second. Large ice spikes grew from the ground and struck the arms that were coming for the prince. The prince ran through without worry while his opponent prepared his next attack. A nearly 2-meter thick rock slab appeared out of nowhere in front of him, stopping his pathway, or so it seemed. The prince slammed his fist into the slab as he created ice out of nowhere. The sudden expansion of ice inside of the rock slab not only cracked it, it also moved it towards his opponent. At the same time, another large ice crystal grew from the ground, pushing the prince above the stone slab. His opponent was busy using his powers to stop the stone slab from getting close when he saw the prince appear above him. 2 limbs extended from the prince's body, both frost white as they grabbed the edge of the rock slab and pulled the prince forward. The prince's body propelled itself toward his opponent who tried to stop him, but was ultimately too late. The prince landed a clean punch on his face, sending the man flying to the edge of the stage where he only stopped when he hit the barrier that surrounded the stage. "Phew." The prince shook his fist a bit. "Are you okay, friend? I think I hit you a bit too hard." The prince waited for an answer but got none. "Oh, did I knock him out?" The prince looked around. The referee had arrived next to the young man and checked him. Realizing that the young man was out, he announced the prince as the victor. The prince put the axe back into his storage artifact and left the stage. He went to his group and shrugged as they started congratulating him. "I told you guys it would be easy for me, didn't I?" he asked. The group nodded. Ning nodded as well. He was starting to realize just how strong the prince was. He was definitely one of the few strong people amongst the entire 200 people that had taken part in this competition. The next group member to fight was the prince's bodyguard, Hyandus. His was the 15th match, so he got ready to go as well. Hyandus was strong, albeit not as strong as the strongest of the other schools. He did have a lot of essences as most low-essence soul realm people did, but he had a wind core, which needed a lot of essence to have the same effect as other essence cores. thus making his a little worse. It was more of a complementary tool to how he fought. "It's my turn now," he said and left when he was called onto the stage. The group watched as the guard left the hall and went over to the stage. From what they all could see, Hyundai's opponent seemed to be a strong person. "Is he going to be all right?" Yorsha asked. "He is strong, right?" "Don't worry about Hyun," the prince said. "He can take care of himself." "He's the prince's guard, so he must be strong," Ten said. "Right, Your Highness?" "He isn't necessarily strong, depending on what you consider to be strong in the first place," the prince said. "Huh?" The group turned to look at him. "Keep watching. It'll make sense soon," the prince said. Hyundai stood in front of his opponent and brought out a long spear from inside his storage artifact. The spear was entirely made out of wind from the tip to the shaft. His opponent brought out 2 daggers and held them in her hand. One of the daggers was made up of explosion essence, and the other was made up of earth essence. Once both of them were prepared, the fight began. The girl made the first attack, creating multiple fire arrows in the air above her and sending it in Hyundai's direction. Hyundai took a deep breath and swung his spear, which instantly caused a small gust of wind to throw away the fire arrows to the side. "Ho!" the girl said, surprised. "Take this then." Multiple rocks flew in the air, all of which suddenly started burning as she used the power of her core to burn the things close to her. Then, she shot those burning rocks toward Hyundai. Hyundai looked at the flying projectiles and knew that he couldn't use his wind core to deflect them easily. It would cost too much energy to do so. Instead, he used a technique as the wind moved around him, making him lighter and faster at the same time. Then, he disappeared. Hyundai moved fast, far faster than anyone had in the competition until now. He moved around the arena, closing in on his opponent. "Ha ha ha. See?" the prince said as he watched his guard move on the screen. "Little Hyun is fast. He's so fast that even I can't deal with him if he truly gets serious." Hyundai zipped through the air, unseen to the eyes of many people as he arrived at different places around his opponent, his wind spear striking the girl from unforeseen positions. He would strike her from the right shoulder, then stab her on the left side of her waist. The girl tried to use either of her daggers or her fire skills to create an attack that thwarted away Hyundai, who loomed around her like an annoying fly that won't go away. The armor that she wore underneath her clothes were starting to show signs of cracking as the attacks accurately landed on her from all sides. "Damn it!" she cried while her arms covered her head from the attacks. "Go away." A large column of fire erupted from around her that she pushed away from her. Hyundai was forced to stop his attack and move far away from the fire momentarily. However, at the very next second, he came back in with his wind essence opening a path for him. He went straight for the girl's chest and stabbed her with his spear. A clear cracking sound was heard in between all the other noises as pieces of the girl's fire armor fell out of her clothes, instantly turning into the fire as it did so. The girl herself flew backward from the force she was stabbed at, skidding along the ground a few meters away. Hyundai was ready to strike again, but he stopped when he saw that the girl's eyes had gone entirely white. She was knocked. He spun his spear and slammed the butt of it onto the ground before taking a deep breath. He had won. Once the announcement was made, Hyundai went back into the hall where he was greeted with cheers of surprise and awe. "How are you so fast, brother?" Ten asked him. "That was incredible." "Was I?" the young man asked with an awkward little smile. "You were truly incredible," Caleb nodded. "Were you constantly using wind techniques to aid your movement?" Ning asked him. Hyundai smiled and explained vaguely as to what he really did. He apparently used a technique that was similar in concept to what Ning's movement technique used, except he used it on everything, including his spear. "Good work," the prince told him and let him rest finally. After a few more matches, it was Ten's turn. Ten walked into the stage and returned after a quick loss. "That was humiliating," he said as he returned to his group. "How did I lose so fast?" "Your opponent was just too strong," Caleb consoled a fellow loser like him. Finally, he didn't feel so bad about losing at all. He had someone else to share the pain with. Ten spoke about the unfairness of having to fight Essence Soul Realm fighters for a bit but quickly shut up when he saw Ning and Yorsha who had had to fight similar battles and had won. "Your battle should be quick, sis," the prince said. "You got lucky, haha." The princess looked at the board where the matchups were written. I get to beat up weaklings, oh how lucky me, she said with an annoyed voice. I want difficult battles too. You'll get one soon, the prince said. For now, just go out and beat this person. The princess sighed. The battle was up next and she was going to have to fight one of the only 3 Essence Manifestation Realm fighters that had made it through without fighting any Essence Soul Realm fighters. She was truly going to be fighting weaklings. She went out when her name was called and pulled out her light sword. During her previous fight, this was all she had needed to win, so she didn't bother using it much. When the battle started, she threw out a few attacks, while dodging her opponent's attacks. Her attacks were quick and to the point, slamming onto her opponent with quite a ferocity. Ning watched her fight and started getting very curious. The princess had moonlight essence as her core, he had seen that. And he also knew that moonlight essence was the closest essence to pure essence. So, why wasn't she so much stronger than normal people when his pure essence usually brought him so many benefits? Did it really matter that it was pure? Or was something else going on? The princess fought for a few minutes, mostly going back and forth attacks against her opponent. In the end, her barrage of light attacks was too much for her opponent to handle and he gave up. The princess returned to the hall without much happiness in her victory. Were you that bored that you had to play around with the poor young man? The prince asked. What else can I do? You all are enjoying yourself quite a bit, while I'm forced to fight weaklings, she said. I will enjoy my matches however I want. The prince sighed and looked at the match that was just about to start. Then he looked at the red-haired Yorsha next to him. Are you ready to fight and win? He asked. Absolutely, Yorsha said without a second thought. Are you not nervous? The prince asked. You are going up against low essence soul realm fighters, you know? I've already beaten people with essence soul before, the girl said without missing a beat. She was confident that she was going to win against her opponent. Confidence is good, but I'm worried yours is teetering on the edge of overconfidence, young lady, the prince said. You won your first match because your opponent wasn't ready for your burning sun technique. But this one will know that you're from the Red Raven family, and will have made ample preparation. If you don't give this match the caution it deserves, you will lose. Yorsha turned to look at the prince who was serious. She also saw the teacher on the side nodding along with the prince. She was about to say something but stopped herself. Instead, she nodded and replied, Thank you for the advice, I'll keep that in mind. Yorsha used her burning sun technique the moment her battle started. Her opponent, aware of her technique, immediately brought out his essence soul and started attacking. The wind essence soul sent a gust of wind that blew all the heat away from the man, while Yorsha herself stumbled because the wind started picking up around her. She raised her hand to the side and sent out a plume of fire in that direction that moved so slowly that any gust of wind moved it away. Given that they were inside a barrier, Yorsha expected the wind to circulate around and take her fire everywhere. That was what her family had taught her after all. Ever since she was a child, Yorsha had learned how to fight using her essence. She was given a fire staff early on and led to training with her uncles and brothers, giving her a talent for fighting that only came from someone that trained heavily. As the fire roared inside the stage, Yorsha moved, not letting her opponent push her around with his wind skills. Her burning sun remained active as the heat inside the stage continued to increase. He's not as flustered as most usually get, she thought. Signs of a good fighter, I suppose. She started sweating profusely, not only because the temperature was increasing in the stage, but also because she had to use a lot of essence. She had already used many essences earlier in the day when she had a fight, and she hadn't had the time to replenish it enough. If this continued with her opponent sending wind at her all the time, she would most certainly lose. No, as long as I have this ice armor, I should be fine, she thought. She wanted to gamble on the fact that her opponent would give up from the heat before her ice armor became unusable due to the constant stress. Her opponent stayed as far away from her as possible while sending wind attacks at her to keep his distance. Yorsha frowned when she realized that was what he was doing. If you're not going to come fight me, I'm going to bring the fight to you. She suddenly changed her path, and like a glowing fireball herself, she rushed in her opponent's direction. The man frowned when he saw her coming his way. He quickly created a strong gust of air to push her around, but something he hadn't expected was happening that was causing quite a problem with his wind skills. The air that had heated up was moving upward, and since the barriers stopped fresh air from coming in, the only air that could come was from above them, which was continuously spreading the heat all around them even if that wasn't what he wanted. He couldn't control that wind. Yorsha burned through the gust of wind, her ice armor at constant work to keep her cooled down. She could see her opponent sweating quite a lot, which meant it was working. Now she just had to keep at it. A fire sword flashed in her hand when she saw the human-looking Asensic soul's hand fall on her. The sword struck the arm, while her head burned it. The essence soul was made up of wind essence, so it didn't take much damage, but her opponent was still quite hurt from being attacked. Damn it, her opponent finally snapped. He realized that staying back and letting her burn herself out, as he had been originally told to do by his teachers, wasn't going to work. He started preparing his own attack, one that wasn't meant to keep her away, but actually harm her. Blades of wind flew in her direction, each one of which was sharp enough to cut her. Yorsha saw the blades and couldn't help but smile to herself. Her opponent had fallen into her trap. Because the burning sun was the Red Raven family's signature skill, many other people knew about it and knew the techniques to fight around it. People with a water core used water to cool themselves, people with an earth core trapped them inside an earthen enclosure, and people with a wind core pushed the hot air away from themselves. Having a well-known skill meant that there were countermeasures prepared against them. However, being from a long-standing family that had countermeasures against them also meant that they had prepared countermeasures to the countermeasures. Yorsha jumped to the side, dodging the wind blades at the last second as her fingers pointed in her opponent's direction. Suddenly, a small fireball of bluish color flew out from her finger at an almost imperceptible speed and went straight for her opponent. The man noticed the incoming fireball and tried to stop it with his essence soul. He used the wind to try and push it away. However, having stopped using the gust of wind, he had already made a massive mistake. The moment the blue fireball came anywhere close to the man, Yorsha activated it. Boom! A large explosion shook the stage as the fireball exploded and expanded into massive red flames at the same time. Having known what was going to happen, Yorsha sent out more fireball in through the explosions, exploding them as well. The successive explosions were quite strong, and the young man was too caught off guard to bring himself back on track by the time the fourth explosion died. By the time the ringing in his ears stopped, Yorsha was already in front of him, her body burning with heat that would evaporate even water in just a few seconds. Before she could land on her opponent and attack him, a hand appeared from the side that grabbed her opponent and pulled him away. Yorsha was about to follow through with another attack when she realized that it was the referee that had saved him. Oh, she thought when she realized that her opponent hadn't moved on his own. Wait, so I won? The referee checked for immediate wounds on the young man, and after making sure none of the burns on his body was serious, he looked toward Yorsha and nodded. Yorsha returned to the hall with a massive smile on her face once she was announced the winner of this match. Once again, as the final match of the top 64 rolled around late in the afternoon the question came forth for everyone to consider. Was the top 32 going to be taking place today as well? To everyone's expectation, it was. The committee responsible for the competition had decided to go on for half of the top 32 matches, which was 8 matches. And of those 8 matches, Ning's was the first one. Ning sighed and stood up to leave. The teacher tapped him on the shoulder from behind and gave a great smile as Ning turned around. Both you and Yorsha have done a great deal for the academy already. Having 5 members in the top 32 is already more than great. Don't worry about winning, just fight to your heart's content. Ning smiled back at the teacher. Thanks teach, but I'm going to do my best to win anyway, he said and walked out. He arrived on the stage with a girl that was his opponent. Where did you learn to use space essence? The girl asked as they walked onto the stage. He looked at the girl with her blue uniform that belonged to the Blue Spark Academy. My academy, he said. It has quite the repository of techniques. I see, the girl said. It's not a bad technique to catch people off guard. You can be happy you made it this far, but I'm afraid your run ends now. Ning smiled at the girl, saying nothing else. He went on to stand on the other side of the stage with only his sword in his hand. He didn't even have a sheath for his sword anymore, so he had to keep it tucked under his armpits where only he wouldn't be hurt by it. He let the sword drop down and swung it around a few times as he got ready for the battle. His opponent, the girl, looked at him with an earth sword of her own. She had been taught by her teachers how to handle Ning in the battle. Due to his fights being unexpected thanks to his space techniques, she was told how to get rid of that variable. Make the spatial technique irrelevant. An armor of rocks appeared around the girl, covering her in a thin layer of protective earth essence. At the same time, she got ready to fight. As the fight began, she did what she was told to do to make the spatial technique irrelevant. She went into close combat. Ning was taken aback a little, but he had expected his opponent to do something wacky to go against his space technique. That was understandable given how he had won twice against low-essence soul opponents due to that very technique. He dashed forward as well and swung his sword at the girl. The girl dodged and threw out a rock spike from the ground. Ning cut the rock in half before moving in, but the girl threw more rocks at him, and he had to create an earth wall to protect himself. Ning realized only then that even though the girl had come close enough for a sword fight, she had never intended to have one at all. She was instead there to just stop him from catching her off guard with his spatial technique. Ning smiled when he realized that and continued fighting against her. She continued throwing around her earth attacks, but Ning easily defended against them. She needed to do something better if she wanted to defeat him. She ran around Ning, never lingering in a place long enough for him to use his technique. She threw out attack after attack trying to catch an opening where she could use her main skills. Ning was also getting tired of the constant fight that resulted in nothing and thought of taking a more daring approach. The wind picked up around him as his speed and control suddenly increased by threefold as he zipped around the stage going after the girl. The girl dodged what attacks she could and used her earth armor to stop the rest. The armor was deteriorating for the most part, but there was still enough to protect herself. Ning created spikes around the girl, making her have to dodge or destroy them each time. As he continued doing so, he ended up creating a long corridor-like pathway in the middle of the stage, surrounded by large spikes on all sides. The girl realized that and frowned, but this would work well for her as well. A human-like essence soul appeared from behind her that grabbed onto one of the nearby spikes. Ning used his technique at the same time. The girl sensed space essence being used where Ning was and immediately attacked behind her, hoping to either stop the attacks coming for her or catch Ning himself in the act of sneaking at her. However, to the girl's surprise, there was no portal behind her. It was simply used by Ning to get rid of the rock spike that was thrown at him. The girl turned around in time to see Ning with his finger pointed toward her as a tremendous amount of essence gathered on his fingertip. He smiled at the girl. "You shouldn't have looked away." He let the attack out. Light flashed and thunder rang as a massive lightning bolt left Ning's finger and struck the girl right on her chest. She was thrown away backward where she struck the earth wall and fell to the ground. A gaping hole was left in her clothes that was singed, while a small dark spot appeared on her skin inside her as well. The lightning bolt had completely knocked her out in a single attack. Ning slowly put down his hand and raised his other hand in a victorious pose as he had once again won against another low-essence soul opponent. Now that he had won, he was going to move up into the top 16 of the competition. Once he was announced victorious, Ning walked away from the stage amidst many cheers and applause. He had a bright smile on his face as he walked away and returned back to the hall. Only then did his face go from a smile to a slight grimace. His right hand was entirely numb after being shocked by his own lightning. "That's way too much lightning for my own good," he thought. The offensive technique that he had chosen from the school's skill shop had been this very lightning technique that gathered and sent out a very large bolt of lightning in the general direction pointed by his finger. It was a strong offensive technique, but the downside was that he too was hurt by it to some extent as he could not fully send all the lightning essence in the other direction. "Brother Ning, how did you do that? How did you use that lightning technique?" Ten asked the moment Ning returned to the room. "First space and now lightning. Is there anything you can learn?" Caleb asked, equally curious about it all. Hee. Ning gave a massive smile. "That's the benefit of having a pure core. You can use whatever skill you want. I learned that technique back in the academy." The two young men were a little jealous of Ning for being able to learn whatever technique he wanted to learn. The prince patted him on the shoulder. "Good work, little brother," he said. "You did a lot better than I had even hoped for. That lightning bolt was a work of art, I must say. The pure crystal I gave you to absorb yesterday was fully worth it." Ning smiled. "Thank you, Your Highness," he said. No, call me Brother Alan from now on." "Congratulations on entering the top 16, the prince said. "No other school has managed to have anyone in the essence manifestation realm into the top 32. and yet our school managed to get one into the top 16. Blackhawk Academy is truly great, isn't it? Ning smiled, but he could see that the last part of the words wasn't meant for him. They were rather there to taunt the other people that were focusing on them. The next couple of matches were a sight to see as well. As there were only 16 different matches in the top 32, each one was going to be worth it to watch. It was also important to watch, especially because this late into the competition, people would start revealing techniques that they had been hiding all this time. Ning saw his next opponent in the second match, a man with a ponytail that had a water core in him. He saw the water essence soul that he brought out, which looked like an armadillo fused with a human in some instances. The next 3 matches after that were entertaining as well, but it was only after that the students got a little tense again. The prince's match was up. The prince walked into the stage and saw his opponent, a blue-haired girl, walk out as well. "Hello." He waved to the girl as they walked up to the stage, only to be completely ignored by the girl. The girl had heard rumors about the prince being a playboy, so she didn't want to talk with him at all unless he sweet-talked her into not fighting as hard. The prince had no such intention though. At the moment, he wasn't even thinking of the girl as a girl, but as an opponent he needed to defeat. He pulled out his axe, the one with the red head and the bluish-white handle. As he grabbed it, cold mist drifted down from where it was held, clearly telling everyone that the handle of the axe was made out of ice. The fight began with the prince taking the first turn. He sent out a small fire attack at his opponent and watched her dodge. He spread the fire this time around and forced her to use wind essence, which he could see came from her sword. The girl had a fire core, which he already knew, but he still wasn't sure what other essence conduit she had. He could see the sword, but the armor was still missing. 3 ice spikes grew from the ground around him as he sent them flying in the girl's direction. The girl waved her palm, and a massive arm made out of the fire came out as it completely destroyed the 3 ice spikes. The fire essence soul then came out in its entirety as the girl prepared for the upcoming fight against the prince, who was a realm stronger than her. The prince smiled and started sending out a barrage of attacks. The girl stopped everything she could and even sent out attacks of her own that the prince had to stop. The prince tried to close in on the girl at multiple times, but the fire skill she used was too much for him to get close. While not on the level of Yorsha's, this girl's fire burned hot as well, melting each attack he made with his ice before it even got to her. He only had 2 options now, which were to either use a large ice attack that wouldn't melt entirely before it reached her, or find a way to get just close enough that he could use the essence in his sword's handle. He decided to keep it for the next couple of matches and started fighting with just his ice essence. He jumped in close enough as he could get and slammed his feet onto the ground. The ground cracked, and from the crack formed ice that spread all around the stage, but mostly in the girl's direction. The ice melted before they reached the girl, but it also weakened the heat quite a bit. The prince continued pouring out ice along the surface until the heat was weak enough, and some of it reached right next to the girl. At that moment, he suddenly turned into ice, shattering into many crystals, while his real body popped out from the ice that had reached the girl. The girl panicked as the prince had just teleported right in front of her and was ready to deliver his finishing blow. The fire limb of the girl's essence soul moved to hit the prince that had just appeared, but at the last second an ice arm came out of the prince as well, stopping the firearm. The girl was too slow to stop the actual attack. The prince swung with his fire axe, but at the last second stopped. Instead, another white arm flew out from his right, passing through the girl entirely, snuffing out any flames around her. A chilling cold surrounded the girl immediately, and before she could even react, the ice swallowed her, completely freezing her over. Then, the prince delivered the final kick that sealed the deal. The girl was sent flying far away, where she struck the wall of the barrier, losing the battle. The prince looked at the axe in his hand and wondered if he should have used it. However, not using it felt like the correct answer here, given that he needed to keep the secret going for at least until the next round. He couldn't let the people strategize against him for the whole time tomorrow. He walked back to the hall, quite happy with his performance. With 2 members of the Blackhawk Academy moving into the top 16, that was already more than the statistical average number of people that could move onto the top 16 from the 10 academies. The teachers were already more than happy with the current scenario, and they still had 3 battles to go, of which they hoped that even more would pass along. The 7th match took place and then the 8th. The 8th match included the prince's bodyguard, Hyandus, who once again showed incredible ferocity in his battles. The wind whipped around his opponent, while he himself went in and attacked with his spears. His essence soul, a wind soul that had two spear-like arms, also attacked his opponent's light essence soul. He managed to defeat his opponent after a rather lengthy back and forth, which now sent 3 of the Blackhawk Academy's disciples into the top 16. The competition ended for the day, and everyone started leaving the hall. The atmosphere around the students and teacher was quite energetic, as everyone happily walked away. Even the 3 that were already knocked out of the competition couldn't help but feel happy seeing how up their school was doing so well. The headmaster joined them soon and started laughing outside the arena even as the passers-by walked away with weird looks in their eyes. His ecstatic laugh made the others feel even better about themselves. I can only imagine how much anger those that made a move against us must be feeling right now, the headmaster said, clearly intending for the people that drugged their food to listen to his words. To think they helped us find such good students. I should probably go and thank those people. The other teachers laughed with them as well. Ning and the rest didn't know how to respond at all, so they just remained quiet and let the teachers laugh for a bit. Ning! A voice called out suddenly. The teachers didn't care, but Ning and a few other students did. Ning turned around, searching for who was calling him. When he did, his eyes fell on a blue-haired girl that waved at him very enthusiastically. Oh, he was a little surprised to see her here. Ooh, a beauty, the prince spoke, but the princess quickly slapped him on the back of the head. Stop being a hungry pig whenever you see a girl, she said before looking at Ning. You know her? Why yes, Ning said. She's a friend from back home. I didn't expect her to show up in this place. Hee. Caleb nudged him on the side with his elbow. Come on now, don't be shy. Friend, I don't know about that. Look at how happy she is at finding you. Ning. The girl shouted again, gesturing him to go to her. Invite her over, Ten said quickly. I don't think she wants to, Ning said, not wanting to call her over. Tisk. The prince clicked his tongue in response. The teachers heard the commotion soon and joined in as well. What's going on? One of them asked. My friend is here to visit me. Is it all right if I go meet with her for a while? Ning asked. Friend? The headmaster spoke up and looked to the side to see the girl that was waiting for him on the other side of the road. You can go meet her for a while, but make it short. It's been nearly a year since I saw her, headmaster. It will need to be a bit longer, Ning said. How about you guys go ahead? I'll see you all later. It's the final day of the competition tomorrow, the headmaster said. I don't know if I can. I'm just visiting a friend, headmaster, Ning said. I don't think there's much you have to worry about. It should be fine, headmaster, the teacher Hyan said. He's worked hard. Let him meet his friend for now. The headmaster thought for a while and sighed. Fine, go meet up with her, he said. You can take your time, but no more than 2 hours. I want you back by 8 when we have dinner. Yes, headmaster, Ning said with a small smile. Also, every hour that you are late, I will remove the rewards that I said I will give. Since you got 2, if you're late you won't get any, the headmaster said. Ning frowned a little hearing that. All right, he said. I'll be back in time. Good, you can go now, the headmaster said. Ning didn't like the headmaster's words, but at least he left him to go. He walked away and crossed the road, arriving in front of the blue-haired girl who excitedly went in and hugged him. Ning was a little surprised, not knowing what to do. Hug me back, the girl whispered. Okay, he said and hugged her back. It's good to see you too, Sophie. It had been over 7 months since Ning had seen Sophie. The last time he had seen her was in the fort town where he had left the Paradise Hunters temporarily to come to learn in the Blackhawk Academy. It was a surprise to see her here, and it was even a bigger surprise to see her so excited at meeting her. She was never this excited before, was she? Maybe she had a crush on him. Ning sighed. He would have to reject her gently if that was the guess. All right, let go of me. They're gone, Sophie said as she herself let go of Ning. Ning saw behind him that his academy mates had moved on. Oh, he said and let go. Only then did he see Sophie's somewhat serious face. You aren't happy to see me, are you? He asked her. Huh? Why would I be happy? Sophie asked. I was just told to act the part so they would let you talk to me. Is that so? He asked with an awkward smile. He felt stupid thinking she might have had a crush on him. He shook his head. Anyway, what brings you here? I'm surprised you even left the Crowler Empire in the first place, Ning said. I do not know why we had to come here, Sophie said. Kepler knows the actual mission. I'm really just here to protect him. Kepler? He's here? Ning asked with a surprised look. Wait, is this a mission from the boss? I believe so, Sophie said. Kepler doesn't move unless he thinks there is something important or is ordered directly by the boss. Did he send you here to get me? Ning asked. Yes, you have time to come with me, right? She asked. Well, thankfully I made some time, Ning said. Where are you staying? If possible, I will need to return quickly. We just got here half a day ago. Everyone is still staying in the carriage by one of the houses in the village, she said. All right, let's go, Ning said. As Ning and Sophie walked away, a thin old man looked in Ning's direction with a narrowed look on his face. Isn't that the Wonder Kid from Blackhawk? He asked the people beside him. He was the headmaster of the Essence Heart Academy and was speaking to the teachers of his academy. That is the young man with space and lightning attacks, one of the teachers confirmed. What is he doing walking away from the group? Another teacher couldn't help but ask. It doesn't matter, the headmaster said as he gritted his teeth. What matters is that he's now isolated. He's going to be fighting our Grasian in tomorrow's top 16 battles, isn't he? This is the perfect time to take him out. The short female teacher stepped up. Do you need me to act again? She asked. Yes, Teacher Sheena. Your last work was perfect. We only failed because we failed to consider that there would be folks that wouldn't be in the group to eat, the headmaster said. Now, you can deal with him directly. A young man walked out of the arena with an older man, surrounded by multiple people that walked along with them. The young man was Nayland Foreman, the person Ning had a scuffle with 2 nights ago. He looked quite nervous and angry at the same time. They got to a carriage that was set up close by, where they got onto it and left to go back to the city. Are you sure the sword is any good? The older man asked while the carriage started moving. That young man didn't even use it all that much. Father, I promise you, it's incredible. He used it yesterday and created massive rocks easily. That sword is definitely something, Nayland said. The older man was Sabern Foreman, Nayland's father, and the current head of the Foreman family, the unofficial ruler of the White Owl region. You aren't doing this because you got embarrassed by Jen, right? The man asked. Nayland stopped himself from speaking. I'm doing it in part because of that, but I can assure you, father, that is no ordinary weapon. That bastard even used sand yesterday. Sand? Have you ever seen someone use sand using an earth sword, father? What makes you think he used the sword? His father asked. You saw him use space essence and lightning essence today. Do you still think he used sand essence through the sword? Hell, he could even have been wearing an armor underneath that we didn't know about. Nayland kept quiet, thinking of some sort of retort, but nothing came to mind. All he knew was that the sword Ning had was the heaviest object he had ever held in his hand, and it was not ordinary in any sense. You will understand when you sense the sword yourself, father, Nayland said. Just find a way to get your hands on it, father. If you still think it's not good, I won't say anything anymore. Sabern looked at his son and sighed. Let's not do anything rash for the next 4 years, okay? We are so close to becoming the actual ruler of this land. Please do not do anything that will ruin this for me. Nayland frowned. I don't think I can do anything like that, he said, cowering into his seat. Trying to enrage the Blackhawk Academy certainly counts as one, the man said. Let's just take it slow for now. Once the bastard living in the north is found and killed, we can finally be worry-free. Until then, do absolutely nothing. Have you found him yet? Nayland asked. I'm getting closer. People are revealing more and more information about him, the man said. As the leader of the so-called Paradise Hunter gang, he will have to come out sooner or later. When he does, we'll kill him, the man said with viciousness in his voice. Then, our journey to ruling this region will be as good as confirmed. Ning and Sophie walked along the road in the sunset, the same as many other peoples that were returning from the arena did. He tried to bring up some small talk with Sophie, but she really didn't care much. She simply answered the questions, without asking any of her own in return. As they walked, she noticed his sword and finally got curious. Didn't I help you get a sheath for that sword? What happened? She asked. It broke long ago, though, Ning said. I actually made a wind conduit for it before I joined the academy, but that broke too during the competition. Now I'm sheathless once again. Don't you want one? Tell your teachers or someone in the town. They should make it for you, Sophie said. Ning thought for a moment and shook his head. No, I want to make it on my own this time around, he said. I'll do so once I'm done with the competition. I have some idea of what type of essence I want to use. Okay, you do you, Sophie said. They continued walking for a little longer before Ning saw a carriage that Sophie pointed at. That's the one we came in, she said. Together, they walked up to the carriage and Sophie knocked on the door. After waiting for a moment, the door opened and a short man with black hair walked out. He stepped to the side, allowing the two to walk in. Ning looked at the man, not recognizing him at all. It was someone in the Paradise Hunters gang that he had never seen before. It wasn't that weird as he had rarely ever met anyone while in that gang. He walked in and met with 3 other people inside, 1 woman and 2 men. One man was sitting on one side of the carriage, while the remaining man and woman seemed to be a couple who were rather close to each other. Ning quickly recognized the single man and greeted him. Ah, good to meet you again, Kepler. How long has it been? He asked. He had only seen Kepler in the Greyfire City where he had met the gang for the first time. After that, when they were moved to the Fort City, he hadn't met him again. Ning got into the carriage and sat next to him before greeting the remaining people. He then turned toward Kepler. You are a long way from home, he said. What are you guys doing here? A mission, Kepler said. What mission? Ning asked. Kepler didn't get angry. He just smiled. We're here to check on your progress, he said. My progress? Ning was surprised. Haha, you had nothing to worry about. Sophie says you only came here today, but ask about anyone and they'll say I'm one of the most talented fighters in the competition. Well, if you ignore my age at least. Kepler smiled. Is that so? He asked. He turned toward the couple in front of him and gestured for them to leave. The couple smiled. We'll go find someplace to stay for the time being, the man said and walked out. They took Sophie and the other man along with them, leaving Ning alone with Kepler. Oh, do you have something secret to talk about? Ning asked. Why did you send them out? Kepler chuckled a bit. I told you, I'm here to check on your progress, he said. Although, that's the lie we told those out there. Ning frowned for a moment. What do you mean? He asked. Kepler thought for a moment. Let's start with how strong you've gotten for now. I see you're in the essence manifestation realm, which is quite surprising. I hadn't believed it when I read it in the letter, but it turns out to be true. Yes, Ning said. And it's a pure core. I can create any type of essence without worrying about the output being low. Kepler gave a scornful look when he heard that. Stop trying to make me jealous. I already am, he said. Ning chuckled. So, what else did the academy teach you? He asked. How good is your essence sense? Can you search for enemies easily? Huh? Ning was confused by the random question. What was the point of even asking that? It's okay, I guess. Ning said. About as good a low essence soul realm person's essence sense. Why do you ask? Kepler leaned in to whisper. So what you're telling me is even with that, you can't sense her? He asked. Ning frowned for a moment before moving back and looking around the small carriage. He tried searching for any sort of essence he could find and scrutinized it a bit. The only essence he could sense belonged to Kepler and a faint essence from someone close outside, but that was light essence so it couldn't be who he was looking for. He couldn't sense the shadow essence at all. Clara? He called out. Are you in here? He waited for an answer, but there was none. He frowned, searching around the carriage and outside to see if someone was there. If it was Clara, she would have hidden herself with no one able to find her. Even when he first met her, there had been 3 essence manifestation realm opponents, none of whom could notice her at all. Not only was her body completely invisible thanks to her shadow essence, but her essence itself was also invisible to everyone's senses. There was no way for Ning to see or sense her as he was right now. Why are you not answering? Are you not here? Is she not here? He asked Kepler. She is close by and she wants you to find her yourself, Kepler said. Apparently you mentioned something to her in one of the letters about it. Huh? Ning thought for a moment. His eyes wandered in thought before he realized something. Oh, my defensive skill. Defensive skill. Kepler was a little confused. What about it? Hee. Just watch. Then, Ning started using his skill. Ning used his defensive technique. His core jumped into action as it started pouring out an insane amount of essence that gathered all around his body, straining him to stay there. The leaving essence also put a burden on his core, but Ning was strong enough to handle both of those burdens without faltering to it. After all, he knew they would only fatigue him temporarily as he had tried out the technique multiple times before. Kepler was stunned at the absolute amount of essence that was gathered in Ning's body. It was more than what his core held right now. Was this really someone in the same realm as him? Then, his surprise multiplied when he sensed an essence he had never sensed before. What was this essence? It didn't feel dangerous like fire, nor solid like earth. It wasn't calm like water or free like the wind. It wasn't light, and it most certainly wasn't shadow. And it wasn't any of the naturally occurring essences that could be found. It was an essence that he could feel had no attribute to it, and yet, it wasn't pure essence which was truly without attribute. Pure essence usually had substance, but this essence felt like it was without any substance, almost as if it was there, and at the same time, it was not. In all sense, it was an essence that was completely empty. When all the essence turned to this element, it released from Ning's body in a bubble around him that grew as it went outward. The essence was invisible and thus it produced no color. At best, one could see a shock wave-like fluctuation move through the air as it moved across the carriage. It was an empty essence that turned the other essences empty themselves. When the bubble grew and crossed Kepler, he felt the lingering essence around his body suddenly disappear as if it never existed. Wah! He was surprised. In the corner of the carriage, furthest away from Ning, a layer of shadow essence was removed as Clara's surprised face became visible for the first time. She was too speechless to even speak. There you are, Ning said with a satisfied smile while breathing quite heavily. Using this technique put a lot of burden on him. Clara still continued. You really learned a technique to use void essence. Yes, I did, Ning said as he tried to catch his breath again. Void essence. Kepler looked with a confused look. What's that? I've never heard of such an essence before. Clara was about to explain when she sensed something. Who's there? She called out in a loud voice. Ning quickly turned his attention away to see what she was referring to and sensed someone outside with a strong light essence core. He had sensed that person before, hadn't he? The person started running away. Ning was about to act when Clara disappeared again and arrived outside with Ning sensing anything about her movement. She was crazy fast to the eyes and she appeared next to the person that was running away instantly. The person, a female, tried to attack back with the essence soul. However, she was too weak for Clara. With 2 punches to the face and guts and a single strike on the neck, she made the person fall unconscious. Ning and Kepler quickly walked outside and saw the woman. Who's she? She was spying on us, Clara said as the 2 of them arrived next to her and looked at them carefully. Wait, that uniform, Ning recognized. That's from our rival academy. What is she doing here? Your rival academy? Clara turned to look at him. Ning nodded. Yes, he said. She should be a teacher from the Essence Heart Academy. So she wasn't after us, but you? What is she doing here following a student like you? Clara asked. They must have been scared because of my performance in the competition and wanted to mess with me so I didn't do well tomorrow, Ning said. Someone has already poisoned our food to keep us from winning, so I wouldn't be surprised if something like this happened. Just as Ning said that he remembered what the headmaster had hypothesized. Their biggest enemy, the Essence Heart School, was most likely behind the poisoning. Given that this woman was here, Ning frowned slightly at the implication. Maybe she is the one who poisoned our school students 2 days ago, Ning said with a look that was almost certain. I see, Clara said, as long as she's not after us. She swung her arm and a black, gooey substance flung out from her arm, linking up to the woman's 2 arms as they pulled together to restrain her. I'll ask her questions once she wakes up, Clara said. For now, I need to speak with you. Ning nodded and walked back with Clara to the carriage while Kepler was left to deal with the unconscious woman. Ning got into the carriage with Clara, the entire time wondering why he couldn't sense her even while he had in front of her. Something was quite confusing about all of this. Was she somehow still using her shadow essence to hide from him? Ning couldn't figure out what else would the reason be. Clara sat opposite Ning and stared at him for a second. So, as Kepler mentioned, I'm here to learn about your progress, she asked. Ning nodded for a moment and a thought came to his head. When you say progress, I'm assuming it's not regarding me, is it? He asked. Clara shrugged. It could be anything, she said, trying to be vague. For instance, how's your memory issue going? Have you remembered anything yet? Memory issue. Amnesia, Ning said, only now somewhat remembering that this was the role he had chosen for the Paradise Hunters, just as he had chosen the role of a young son of a small noble from the Frolane Empire for the others in the academy. Nope, no memory, he said. Well that's too bad, Clara said. Then let's talk about the actually important stuff. Let's talk about the important stuff, Clara said. What I sent you here to do. Ning laid back on the seat and looked at her with a curious look on his face. Can I ask, how old are you exactly? He inquired. Clara raised an eyebrow. She thought for a bit and said, something like 43 years, she said. Did you leave this place when you were 17 then? Ning asked. Clara's eyes narrowed in surprise. So you found something? She asked. You're part of the Grazer family, aren't you? Ning asked. The one that used to be the ruler of the White Owl region, but was instead wiped out in a fire that appeared out of nowhere and killed everyone? Clara glared at Ning for a while before sighing. Yes, I am from that very same family. The one and only member of the Grazer family that still remains, she said. I see, Ning said. I assumed that after I learned about the family and what had happened in the past. Forget the past and talk about what's happening right now, she said. I've already moved on from my identity as a Grazer. Oh, Ning was a little surprised. All right, so here's what I found out. He told Clara everything he had found out. He told her about the Formans, about the 30-year agreement they had with the Black royal family of the Blackhawk Dominion, and how there was a rumor that a son of the Grazer family was still alive. I see, Clara said with a thoughtful look after hearing everything. So they don't want me to make a return and become the ruler of the White Owl region, huh? That's what I heard, Ning said. Do you think you want to? I hear that they have an agreement with the Black royal family, so if you were to go back, you could become the ruler? Clara quickly shook her head. That's not even a possibility, she said. The moment I get on the throne, they will kill me. Just like they did my father and my family. A deep sense of pain and anger flowed in Clara's voice that Ning could very distinctly capture. She was remembering her past and the traumatic memories flooded her mind. Ning heard what she said and looked at her closely. So it wasn't an accident? He asked. What happened 25 years ago was actually an attack on your family? Clara nodded. Yes, we were attacked in the middle of the night. The people that attacked us were so strong that we couldn't even find the time to fight back. Before I knew it, my father had already died, and later my mother died while trying to send me and my twin brother away, she said, tears slowly filling her eyes. My brother was caught in the fire when the building collapsed on him. I tried to help but the fire was too strong. With someone's essence amplifying the heat, my brother died burning alive. I merged into the shadows and ran away in the middle of the night, running forever and ever to get away from them, she said. I didn't want them to find me ever, so I disappeared to the north. Did you never think about coming back here for revenge? Ning asked. I did, she said. But no matter how much I hated my enemies, I always knew one thing. I was never strong enough to defeat them. So, I never tried. Ning thought for a moment. I get that you were never strong enough to defeat them, but you could have at least tried to go find help. I don't think the royal family would hold back if you let them know what had happened, he said. The foreman would definitely get punished, wouldn't they? Clara scoffed a bit. The foreman? Why would they get punished? She asked. Ning paused for a moment. Are they not the ones that attacked your family? He asked. Don't you think I would have found allies to come to my cause if that was the case? Clara asked. Then, the enemy is someone so strong that you can't look for help? Ning asked before slowly dismissing the possibilities until he landed on one. The Black royal family? He asked. Are they the ones that attacked your family? Yes, Clara said. I'm surprised you got it so quickly. Why would the royal family attack you? Ning asked. Two reasons from what I understood over the years, Clara said. First, the White Owl region is the best region other than the Blackhawk region when it comes to natural geographical defenses thanks to the mountain range to the east. And second, the Black family were getting scared that we were getting very strong very fast, and soon enough we would become stronger than them and become the true ruler of the Blackhawk Dominion. Ning's eyes got serious. Why would they think that? He asked. Were you guys powerful? They were mostly scared because after a terrible earthquake more than half a decade ago, one by one, people with shadow essence started showing up in the family, she said. We started trading with the other continent and bought a lot of shadow skills, which we trained in. It was very soon understood that shadow essence was quite strong for many things, and that scared the Black family. Their fear truly became existential when they realized that we had unearthed an essence crystal cave in our family ground where the essence was over 95% shadow, she said. The discovery was mostly kept a secret, but someone must have told the Black families sometimes after that. 3 months after, our family was attacked and everyone was dead, but me, she said. I alone ran away with this ring full of the shadow essence crystal. Ever since then, I've been doing my best to try and survive. I had even forgotten about revenge as it never seemed possible. And yet, somehow the past doesn't seem to want me to move on, she said. Fine, if they want to drag me back, I'll come back, and I'll bring back everything I have tossed away with me.